So how long do you think this is actually going to the situation is going to last?
So who knows? Like your guess is as good as mine. If anybody tells you that they know what Putin's thinking, they're probably lying to you or they're
Sure.
trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
So far, the guy, love him or hate him, is not stupid. Okay, and he knows that his best weapon against Europe is energy.
All right. Welcome everybody to the Angel Research Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stutman, and we are here as usual today to discuss the market's hottest stock stories and investment opportunities. We've got a special guest, Kieth Kohl, on the show. Kieth is the founder and managing director of multiple investment advisory services focusing on technology, biotechnology, and energy industries. We're going to be focusing mainly on the latter today. There's a ton of stuff that we can talk about with Kieth. He's a really knowledgeable guy. But today we're going to be, really focusing and honing in on the energy aspect of things. And more specifically, the impact, the repercussions, and potential investment opportunities surrounding the geopolitical shakeup that's going on in Ukraine.
Right.
We've experienced a lot of these impacts already around the world, but Kieth kind of thinks that this situation hasn't quite peaked yet. He sees an impending energy crisis occurring in Europe. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about potential ways to turn this crisis into an opportunity, a profitable opportunity. Maybe Kieth will give us some of his favorite stocks or point us in that direction. Real quick disclaimer. Nothing that we say here today is personal financial or investment advice. We can give you the tools and the insights that you need to make good investment decisions for yourself, but we can't make these decisions for you. Also, if you like what you see, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment. It really helps us out. With all that out of the way, Kieth, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
It's good to have you here. I've kind of been looking forward to it.
So, as I was going to say, as you said earlier, I run the energy newsletter
Sure.
that we publish called Energy Investor, and I wanted to actually focus on some of the situations that are coming up, particularly this winter, revolving around a European energy crisis that really isn't getting the attention it deserves.
Okay.
But before we get into that,
Sure.
I want to kind of lay out how this all started.
Okay.
So my question right now
Yeah.
is actually for our younger producers here. When do you think this all started, the biggest issues with Germany's energy crisis that it's facing
The look
right
on
now?
Sarah's face. She has this she's like, oh my God, I
Just
can't
give a
believe you're
guess.
asking me a question.
Give a guess. Like when did their troubles start?
Well, I'd say maybe a few decades ago, probably.
Oh man,
She's going way back. Dude, were you
Right.
expecting her to give
I
you a
was
specific
I was
answer?
expecting her to say, like everybody else I've asked this. I was expecting her to say when Russia attacked Ukraine, because Russia as I'll mention many times, Russia supplies over half of
Sure.
Germany's natural gas.
Yep.
She's right. It started in the 70s when they started building a network of pipelines between Russia and Germany to flow some of that natural gas in Russia over their way.
Okay.
And so it's kind of interesting because back in the 70s, like there was a huge uproar. Obviously, Soviet Union was heading into the prime Cold War decade,
Yeah.
right? So Germany was actually warned by Nixon back in the 70s about this issue of becoming too dependent on Russian energy.
Sure. Didn't Trump make a similar warning?
I believe he did.
Okay.
But he went a step further that we'll get into probably another time.
Okay.
But essentially, Germany promised the world, like, we're never going to supply more than 10% of our natural gas from Russia. So fast forward to 2019. You have Russia supplying Germany with over half of its natural gas, 70% of its thermal coal, a little bit oil to boot, and there's been a couple of catalysts that have happened that have shaped this into just a full-blown energy crisis.
Sure. Do you mind if I kind of like put like read off some headlines that I collected to kind of frame the situation, or do you want to just you want to?
Sure, if you want.
Sure. So I have a couple here. I got one from foreignpolicy.com that says Europe's worst energy nightmare is becoming a reality. I've got one from Washington Post that says a record heat wave is deepening Europe's energy crisis. And I've got one from Bloomberg that says Europe's energy crisis will cost you $200 billion. I don't know who you is, maybe more. So those are obviously some pretty frightening words.
Sure.
What is really going on here, like right now?
Okay, so again, you have to understand that for the last couple of decades, Germany has put itself in a position of heavy reliance on Russian energy.
Yes.
Now, there's actually a similarity between Germany and the U.S., right? And so leading up until, let's say, 2008, the U.S. was producing a record low amount of oil domestically. Yeah. And then we tapped into our tight oil and gas resources, which created a boom that led into an unprecedented output from U.S. producers. Germany in 2008 didn't have these resources. So what they did was they started turning to renewables, right? So 2011, they spent $131 billion. They pledged $131 billion over 5 years to phase out their nuclear. So basically, they wanted to facilitate the transition to green energy.
Okay.
Right? And they started spending records amount of money over the last decade, right? This exacerbated the problem that we're in today, right? They shuttered 3 of their 6 nuclear plants. They pledged a couple years ago to close all 84 coal plants. Like, they were really going hardcore wind, solar, renewable energy.
What was the rationale for them shutting down nuclear?
It's dirty. Oh, for nuclear.
Yeah. It's like I don't understand that. Like, I genuinely don't get.
It
why
wouldn't make sense
push.
Considering their neighbor produces 75% of their electricity from nuclear power in France.
Okay.
So maybe green virtue signaling. You can call it whatever you want.
Yeah. So they were cutting. You're saying that they were basically. Germany was essentially committing to these renewable sources.
I got you.
And that's kind of got them in
up
bind.
Until 2022.
Yeah.
Right. Let's fast forward to 2022. Up until that point, there's been some aggression by Russia over the Ukraine, and you have to wonder what was in Putin's mind. And at first, when the tanks started rolling through the border, I think there was a general sense that Putin was trying to do exactly what he did in Crimea in 2014, I believe, where you just roll a bunch of military assets over there, throw up a shoddy little vote, and then have them declare independence and then annex the Crimean Peninsula to Russia. So they were trying to do this to the Donbass region, and that's essentially what the narrative was. And then the tanks just kept rolling. And so the situation went from this is going to be over in a couple weeks to we are now in month 9 of this invasion.
So how long do you think this is actually going to the situation is going to last?
So who knows? Like, your guess is as good as mine. If anybody tells you that they know what Putin's thinking, they're probably lying to you or they're trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
So far, the guy, love him or hate him, is not stupid. Okay, and he knows that his best weapon against Europe is energy. Just to give you an example of kind of a little bit of hypocrisy on Europe's side too, Europe spent about 2.5 billion euros so far in military support. Germany has. They basically gave them $2.5 billion of military support to Ukraine.
Yep.
In the same time, they've spent like 46 billion euros on Russian energy.
Sure, and that kind of points to the level of dependence that they have. Like, politically, they're taking a stand that they support Ukraine, but from a financial perspective and from where they need the major input for their economy, are there any contingencies that Europe has to reduce this reliance, or like what actions
we
can they
get
take?
We're gonna lead into that.
Sure.
I promise. But the major crisis immediately is natural gas into Germany. Again, I told you they supply over half of their gas from Russia. So the primary pipeline is the Nord Stream pipeline that sends about 55 billion cubic meters a year into Germany. At 100% flows, everything's fine.
That's the Nord Stream, right?
The Nord Stream, right. And so, just as little aside, they actually, Germany cut plans to even make the Nord Stream 2, which sent Russia over to China to make new pipelines, but that's for another day.
Okay.
But essentially, the Nord Stream pipeline was pumping an immense amount of gas into Germany. And so the issue comes during the winter, right? They have far colder winters than we do. It's a matter of life or death whether or not they have natural gas stored for the winter. And so because this war has dragged on, they haven't been able to fill their gas storage levels nearly as much as they want. Right now, they're probably around 67% full.
And is that just because the gas is too expensive? Is it because that Russia is reducing the amount of gas that they're sending over there?
So a little while ago, Russia essentially cut the throughput of the Nord Stream pipeline down to about 60%.
Okay.
And then just more recently, he cut it down to 20% of total capacity.
Okay.
So this is creating a serious problem later on because they're trying to, like, this is typically the season when you would be injecting natural gas into storage.
Okay,
like,
so heading into winter, Germany likes to basically fill their supply of natural gas.
Well, they have to.
They have to in order to
absolutely.
get through the winter.
Absolutely.
And Russia, I guess, presumably made a strategic decision to reduce the gas that they're sending them to put pressure on them, or.
Well, it's all this is how you weaponize energy.
Yeah.
And here's kind of the interesting point to the 20% number that I'm seeing. So when Putin announces that they're reducing rates to that level, he has good reasons to cite for it because ever since they put oil and gas sanctions on Russia, Russia has issues when it comes to maintenance, to repairing certain equipment, because nobody else is going to work with them.
Sure. I know you were kind of telling me something about this situation with Canada. They had to lift some sort of. They basically lifted like a.
There was basically a turbine that needed to get fixed for a natural gas facility. I think it was a compression station.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong on that.
And Canada does the repairs.
And Canada would do the repairs. So Canada refused to do the repairs, which sends a spiraling set of consequences all the way down. And here, that's a valid reason for Putin to say, hey, we had to reduce output levels. But what's interesting is that the 20% number, so on June 23rd, the EU basically set mandatory minimums for gas storage. So they said that in order to survive this winter, and I'm saying probably without severe rationing and stuff like that, which they're already starting to tease a little bit to people. But they set its storage level at 80% by November 1st. That's usually October is when it sort of starts hitting the starts hitting the fan.
By when did you say?
By November 1st
November
is
1st, okay.
Their target is 90%.
Okay.
Right? Now, in order to meet this 80% minimum goal, then they need gas flows from the Nord Stream pipeline to be between 20 and 25%. So Putin's kind of keeping them right on that edge for his own advantage, for his own to exploit the dependence that's on that everybody has on them for their energy.
Yeah. So we have contingencies of lowering energy usage. Is there any alternative that Germany or Europe has in terms of bringing more natural gas in? How else can they because I know that the executive director of the International Energy Agency recently put out a post, and he listed 5 different coordinated actions that are essential to preventing a major gas crunch in the EU. And basically everything on that list that I was reading seemed to be reducing demand.
Right.
Is there anything that Germany can be doing to help the supply situation right now?
Well, I wanted to get back to gas storage for you. Okay.
Okay.
So basically, there's a couple things that they can do. And so one of the things that they're doing right now is sort of what California did just last September, I think it was, where they basically changed the rules saying that some nuclear, some natural gas is actually green. They're trying to relabel and try to make it more palatable to the international community.
Yeah.
Who, obviously, the hype is over emission targets and cutting all fossil fuels out by 2050.
Yeah.
What I think this really does, though, is highlight, like, it's almost evidence that the transition to renewables, which will happen, like Germany has made some great strides in wind and solar, but it's not going to happen overnight. And I think that the situation they're in right now reiterates that, incredibly confirms what's going on. And that is that they're going to need natural gas. And so the alternative would be to import it obviously the alternative is to import it from somewhere else. The problem is the only other solutions would be to increase LNG imports that can offset the need for Russian gas.
Sure.
Which is what I believe that they're starting to do now. They just announced, I believe there's 6 projects being developed to construct LNG import terminals.
Okay.
And so I think that it's clear that they're going to go to LNG instead of Russian natural gas because, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice. Like Russia's just going to keep doing this over and over.
Sure.
So I think they're at an inflection point that they're just ready to quit all Russian gas and it actually be a serious ambition. And so you have to look around for what are their alternatives, and there's only really one, and I think that's U.S. LNG.
Yeah.
And in fact, we most recently became Europe's largest supplier of LNG, and I think over the course of the next couple years, that's gonna strengthen into like a serious bull.
Is it just Europe, or didn't we become the largest exporter of LNG in the world?
In the world. Yeah, but we're also Europe's largest customer.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's intricate. That's connected, obviously.
Right.
Okay. How does all of this kind of impact the solidarity of the European Union? Because I feel like a lot of the conversation that we've been talking about is about Germany,
right?
And I feel like Germany has a lot of these problems.
I think they're putting on a good show. I think that the EU basically would announce, "Hey, we're all going to cut demand by 15%."
Yeah,
and then you have, 5 or 6 members like Portugal, Spain, Italy that are more like, "Whoa, wait a minute, we don't use Russian gas whatsoever. Why are we being penalized for this amount?" And
where do they get their energy from?
You would have to look at the individual countries, but essentially you can't send as much. So you can't suddenly increase the output of natural gas flows into Europe from like Spain and Italy because the infrastructure is just not there.
Okay.
Right. And so
why is that? Like, why can't they just like put a bunch of natural gas in trucks or what? Like, what's up with
natural gas doesn't you can't transport natural gas in trucks. Natural gas historically has been a regional market because you can only transport it in pipelines.
Okay.
If that makes sense to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the U.S. just entered a recession? Mm-hmm. Is the EU in a recession yet? Are they shooting themselves in the foot with this kind of like?
I think they've already shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
So one of the big things, and I'll be speaking to Germany specifically for now, but like one of the big issues is that when you start allocating your energy resources toward heating, you have to kind of take it away if there's a shortage. Like I think that the German industrial activity is taking a big hit right now. So it certainly wouldn't surprise me if it comes out that everybody's in a recession. I mean.
Okay. How about these? You were talking earlier about the fact that they have to build more import terminals. Is that a long-term solution, or is that something that like they're going to build these import terminals by the end of they just got to make it through the winter and then they're going to be all good? It's
no longer about making it through a winter, right? Like, so we don't know when this Ukrainian war is going to end, right? So even if it ended like tomorrow, would you still want to be just go on as if everything's just fine and then?
No, of course not.
Right.
So they're set on building these terminals no matter
Right.
what.
So I think that Germany is already going back to the rhetoric of, well, we might open a few coal plants, we might extend the life of a nuclear power plant, we might start building some LNG import facilities, because you got to remember they're right up against the North Sea. So, yeah, the long-term solution. Let me phrase it like this: it is a long-term solution.
How long is it going to take for them to get those?
An average facility is going to take about 3 to 5 years to construct.
Okay.
Like, you got to remember, the first U.S. application to the Department of Energy to export LNG was in August 11th, 2011, right? It took 4.5 years to get the first cargo flows out. But we basically we set up our LNG facilities to import LNG, because in 2008, before this shale gas boom exploded and provided a vast amount of
that
supply,
makes sense.
right? So we were setting up all of our natural gas to come into the United States, and then all of a sudden, within a few short years, we're suddenly a massive player.
Do you know anything about like the logistics of that? Because like to me, I'm thinking like import, export, like what's the difference in terms of like shit? Like what do you have to do?
That's a podcast we can talk about for
Okay.
like 3 more hours that we probably shouldn't get into. But what I would be interested in, and what I need to figure out, is basically what the difference is between simply switching from import to export and building a brand. You
Sure.
would imagine the latter would be a much longer endeavor and cost more billions of dollars more.
Okay, well, let's get to a question that I think a lot of our audience probably legitimately like really cares about in terms of what we're talking about here today. So you think that basically America is Europe's only option in terms of natural gas?
We're like a lifeline for natural gas. Yes.
What are the potential investment opportunities here then?
Right.
In terms of like, obviously that's going to increase demand here. Well, how does that affect us in the States, and how does it affect any LNG companies in the States?
I think there's 2 kind of plays we can go down the road. You can directly look into the owners of these facilities, like the Sabine Pass, and for those I like Cheniere.
What's the SAP? What is that?
So Cheniere directly. The Sabine Pass facility is basically an export terminal in Louisiana, where most of our our LNG is exported out of. It's like right there on the Gulf Coast. It's got very close access to really cheap Permian gas. It's a great spot. So
and do they ship to Europe from that spot, or
you can ship to Europe from that spot.
Okay.
And so LNG is the ticker symbol for Cheniere, which was actually trading around $24 a share when the first shipments started flowing out in 2016, and today they're up to $150. So the growth was incredible. However,
is that a company that you had recommended to your subscribers at some point, or
so the way that me and my readers took advantage of this was through CQP, which is Cheniere Partners.
is it the MLP?
They're the direct owner. CQP is the direct owner of the Sabine Pass facility, and right now it's paying a 7% dividend annually. It's trading at just like 14 times its trailing or its forward earnings.
Yeah.
So it's looking a little cheap. You have a direct investment line through Cheniere into the export facilities in the U.S.
Okay.
Right? But then you have another interesting investment in the tankers, right? Because you have to transport LNG across the ocean, right? That makes sense. And so, Flex LNG (FLNG) is next gen LNG tanker carriers. Or LNG carriers.
That's the type of carrier.
Yes.
That's the company that's making the carriers.
Flex LNG is the company.
Okay.
The ticker symbol is FLNG. I mean, if you want to take a look.
Okay.
So these guys are looking actually kind of cheap. They're trading at 9.8 times their trailing earnings. They're setting a 10% annual yield right now for shareholders. And they have a payout ratio that's a little bit higher than I like to see. That's around 71%, which is the basically the amount of money they're going to be able to put toward dividends.
And they just build and manufacture the tankers?
These
does
guys
transport?
basically have built a fleet of carriers, and they are the ones that do the shipping.
Okay.
And so what's interesting about this is that right now there's a little bit of a bottleneck, right, between in the tanker market. That, I think, is going to open up over the years as more import facilities are built, like, for example, in Germany.
Okay, so when you say bottleneck, you're basically saying that there's like ships that are kind of waiting in line at these facilities waiting to...
It doesn't look like a short-term attractive market because you have a bottleneck of ships. Right.
Okay.
And so I think that over the next few years, LNG is going to be a significantly more attractive investment than it was from 2016 to now.
Sure.
Because we spent the last 6 years ramping up our export capacity and all that, and then we're gonna continue to do that. The difference is now the world is sort of seeing how they can offset some of that energy dependence through LNG, which is what Germany's finding out right now.
Okay. Can you comment at all on prices?
Sure. So, as you probably would expect, there was a sharp increase in the price of natural gas in Germany. They trade on the Dutch TTF. So, like, I'd like to think during the COVID period, the 2-year COVID period, 2020 prices were around 13 to 20 euros per kilowatt hour, and then that amount actually 2021 was around 40 to 50 ish, right? Once the tanks started rolling in, there was a spike in natural gas prices. You're
talking about the invasion of Ukraine, obviously.
The invasion, yeah. The moment that happened in March, shot up to about $200 per kilowatt hour.
From where?
From what, like 40, 30?
30, yeah, you're saying that. Okay, so like almost
we'd have a great chart right here.
Nearly a tenfold increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that obviously came down as the winter abated, right? As we entered into the summer injection season, you're not using as much natural gas.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is that when Putin further cut throughput in the Nord Stream pipeline, we just recently, like within the last week, saw natural gas prices spike to an all-time high. So it surpassed the $200 per kilowatt hour that it had previously done.
Okay.
So they're paying an exorbitant amount of money for natural gas right now, and we're in what should be the seasonally the lowest in demand.
Okay. I know you don't like to make like specific price predictions, but how long do you see that price being that high? Do you think it's gonna because that can't be sustainable, can it?
There's a lot of factors you're going to have to play into. Like, what do you think Putin's going to do? Do you think he's just going to give up the Ukraine territory? Just say all's good. I think he's going to put the pressure. He's going to keep them as dependent as possible on Russian natural gas, which is probably why he cut throughput to begin with, because this is the bare minimum that they need to reach that storage target.
Sure.
So no, I don't want to put a price on it because I think
not a price.
Yeah, I don't think it's
how many years until we start seeing prices start to go down?
Well, what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing Germany start buying
US
LNG.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're going to be looking at LNG prices and inking long. Typically, they deal with long-term contracts, so it's almost more efficient than dealing with Putin, in my opinion.
And as far as investment information around this, I know you mentioned a couple of ticker symbols, a couple of stocks. Is there anything else that you're kind of hiding from us that's available in your newsletters, or you're giving everything away today for free, or what's?
I'm not going to give everything away for free right now. I think you should take a look at the LNG tanker market. Start your search at FLNG. See what you come up with.
Sure.
Do your due diligence.
Yeah. What if I'm lazy and I don't want to do the work?
Well, then there should be a link right below to the energy investor.
Cute. I like that.
Right. You can join our investment community there. We talk about LNG nonstop nowadays. But we also we touch on all facets of the energy sector.
Okay, cool. Well, look, everyone who's watching the show, I thank you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, comment.